Narcissistic relationships are all about the narcissist passing or projecting their guilt onto the victim. Narcissistic personality disorder is a formal clinical diagnosis where you need at least 5 out of 9 of these traits.
Narcissism isn't just a buzzword in popular culture, it's indeed a contemporary societal crisis, and it's infiltrating every part of our lives, including our personal relationships. Whether in the boardroom or the bedroom, it's infiltrating everything: relationships, leadership, culture, even how we see ourselves. And the cost? Burnout, anxiety, emotional abuse, disconnection. We're calling it out and breaking it down. On this episode of Can We Talk, we're joined by Dr. Stuart Wood, a neuroscientist specializing in the impacts of narcissism and toxic behavior. He's a global educator, speaker, and founder of the Narcissistic Abuse Network, who has helped over 100,000 people confront toxic behavior and reclaim their power. This is more than a conversation about narcissism. It's about power, clarity, healing, and the tools to protect your peace in your career, your relationships, and your own mind. If you've ever felt manipulated, emotionally exhausted, or unsure whether the problem is you, it's not. It's time to get clear. It's time to get strong. It's time to talk. Can We Talk starts now.
Dr. Stuart, how are you feeling today?
Very good, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to share my knowledge with you.
I mean, it's such a pleasure to have you. Obviously, it's been a long time coming, and finally we get to have this conversation. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. Yeah.
Brilliant. So just before we dive in, it would just be important to just get some perspective and just get to know a little bit more about you and why this topic seems very crucial and urgent, particularly, in our lives today. And you've dedicated your career to understanding narcissism and toxic behaviors. But I'd love to understand your story and what drew you into this line of work. What's that interest? What pulled you into it?
Before I get into the story, it's probably better that you understand something about my background, because how we're brought up influences how we respond to what's going on around us. So I grew up in a family. I was the youngest of 4. My brother was very, very intelligent, always getting very high grades. I have 2 sisters in between, and then there was me. And as I was growing up, although there was nothing specifically said, the expectation was you've got to perform, basically. And a lot of the reward, whether that was in terms of emotional reward or otherwise, came based upon performance. And so I learned at a very early age that I needed to do well in order to be acceptable or to be recognized. And when you've grown up with that as a foundation, it can push you in different directions. But for me, it pushed me very much into that needing to please and to respond to what others needed and put their priorities over my own, which in itself is not a bad thing.
Absolutely.
But the problem is when that becomes your driving force, then it can become toxic. And so
absolutely.
I moved throughout my years at school, not really believing in my own ability or not understanding the if you like, the ability that other people saw in me. So I was very good at comparing myself to others. And also I tended to hang around with guys who were, they were the kind of guys who in A-level mocks would score 97% and want to know where they'd lost the 3% rather than where they'd scored the 97%. So when you have a need to please, but also that looking out for others, it can produce an interesting tension. And in me, it produced, if you like, it produced this lack of awareness of my own strengths, if you like. And I could see the strengths in others, but I could never see them in myself.
Mm.
Consequently, I went through school, did my what were then O-levels and A-levels. By the time I got to A-levels, I'd virtually burnt out. I'd convinced myself that I wasn't really good enough.
Mm.
And I got my A-levels, but the grades were not as good as expected, apparently. But again, in those days, I'm talking about being at school in the 1970s.
Mm.
We weren't encouraged to be big-headed. So,
Of course,
that whole thing of the positive feedback, it was very often you heard what you hadn't done right.
So you said, just to get more perspective. So you said a lot of we and referencing that you weren't allowed to do certain things and you didn't necessarily get the kind of acceptance or validation. So is this like obviously from your primary caregivers, like parents primarily?
I think it was. My parents were, my dad was born in 1915, my mum was born in 1926. So they came from a generation that had been through, my dad had been through 2 wars, my mum had been through 1. And they came out of the end of the war into that kind of austerity. You've got to make the best of what you've got because we've nothing else. And so I think part of the culture at that time was much more kind of, you just get on and do it and don't worry too much about the emotional stuff. That'll kind of look after itself. But unfortunately, growing up in that, as I say, you develop this kind of awareness that what you do or how you're seen depends upon your performance. And so I was, there's an empathy side in me that I'm really grateful for, but also I was very driven. And so, I went through school, did my A-levels, went to university for a term, basically decided I was going to give up. The only thing I came home from university with was a drum kit, which did not bless my parents at all.
I expect so.
And then I went to work for 3 years in the pharmaceutical industry, in the labs. And it was actually during that time, it's almost like a drying out period for me because I'd lived under the pressure of exams and the need to perform for so long that I almost needed this sort of relaxation period when I could find myself again. And during the 3 years that I worked, I did a part-time qualification, HNC, in applied biology. And for the first time in years and years, I can remember thinking, not only I really enjoy doing this, but I can do it. And so from that point on, I chose to go to university. I spent 8 years at university, ended up doing a PhD in neuroscience. And in some ways, that the need to perform that had been instilled in me stood me in good stead for working hard to make sure that I got good grades. But the downside was that I worked so hard that it actually damaged my health. Finished university, went into work for the pharmaceutical industry for 20 years. My role there was managing clinical trials or designing and running clinical trials, which involved working in the office, but also the part I really loved, which was going out, meeting the doctors who were running the studies, and also seeing the effects or the impacts of the work that I was doing on the end user, the patient.
Of course.
So I although I'm a scientist in background, pure academic science to me didn't have the same appeal as the impact of science applied to produce a result in people.
In 1998, you obviously fell into depression, like you had mentioned, and fast forward on another, like my math's not so great, some 20 odd years, 2017 precisely, you survived a heart attack.
Yeah.
How have all of this, your background, growing up with the kind of parents you obviously described just now, and this life-altering situations or developments, that's the depression episode and the heart attack that you suffered as well. How have all of this made you the man you are today in terms of your resilience, your empathy for your patients and just the people around you? How those all of this tie together?
I think it's an ongoing story. So
Let's
I
hear it.
am today, if you like, part of all the bits that have fitted together through my life, which include the times I've been a right toad and horrible to people, the times I've been good, and the hard times. I think when it comes to things like depression, that for me, that was the turning point for a lot of it, because up until that point, I'd been performing in a particular way with expectations in my own head. And whatever situation had happened at work had pushed me to the point where my body or my mind said no more. And so I was forced to stop. I was basically off work for nearly 2 years. Wow. And for the first 6 months, I thought I couldn't get any lower, but that was just the start. So you just keep falling and falling and falling.
So what plummeted you into this diagnosed state of depression? What was the key factor or the key event that I would say led you down that spiral?
It was, I was working for a boss who I loved, as in, we got on really well socially and we got on really well together. He just had a particular way of managing that didn't suit me. And so I felt mistrusted in the role that I was in, and some of the steps that he took signaled to me, I don't trust you. Now, that might not have been true, but because of what I described earlier, my perception of that was that I wasn't performing well enough, or I wasn't responding well enough. And so that just pushed me to a point where I walked in to work. I remember sitting down at the desk, I switched my computer on, and I just thought it was literally from white to black. Right, that's it, I'm done. I'm not coming in. I've had it. I can't do this anymore. And I think I broke down at the desk as well, but I just said to people, I'm going home. And I just literally got up and went out of the office.
I mean, I'm sure this is a scenario like a whole lot of our listeners would relate to, being in a work environment that feels like hell and, takes a toll on your mental health. And I mean, it's good you're able to reflect on that and realize you had to do the best, what was best for yourself at that point in time. And so that particular event, would you say, amongst other things, that was like how you just went down that spiral, even though you took a decision to choose yourself first? So how did that lead you down that dark alley that you went through?
I think it was more that I went down the dark alley, which then at the end of that got me to a point where I then had to think, now I have to look after myself, because up till that point I'd been running on auto mode, and suddenly this crisis had kicked me into a downward spiral that I wasn't able to stop. Didn't matter how hard I wanted to, didn't matter how hard I tried. I just kept going lower and lower and lower. And I was warned, you'll have to wait, because I knew something was wrong and had been to the doctor, and they said, yeah, we can treat, but at that time, the understanding was that I had to almost wait until I'd reached the bottom, so that I was then in a position to be able to respond to treatment. So a lot of it was just unraveling. It was a bit like unraveling the wall, the kitten that gets hold of the ball and wall. Gradually, it pulls it all off, and all that's left is a mess on the floor. And that just felt very much like my life.
What did all of that teach you about, like, resilience and the importance of healing?
I think it taught me a lot that very often we describe what something is, but we don't always know what it is until we've had to go through it.
Absolutely.
So, we talk about resilience, we talk about confidence, we talk about standing up to things. And in some ways we try to do that, but when all that power is taken away from us and we're put in a position that we can't do it, we have to then find a way to keep doing it. And that's where, with me in the depression, I found a therapist, a counsellor, who was absolutely brilliant at helping me understand the patterns in my life that had led to that, the thought patterns that had brought me to that point of dropping, that then enabled me to put the pieces back together again, to build up so that I could be resilient. When it came to the heart attack, it was a very different issue. That was, I had several over a day.
Yeah, I remember you said, you mentioned that you had an open heart surgery.
Yeah. Well, what happened was I had what I thought was indigestion, and it came on hourly over the day. I was out working, and I started getting these pains in what I thought was my stomach. They got worse through the day, and I started sweating a bit, and didn't think, despite the fact that both my parents ultimately died of heart attacks, it didn't occur to me that this could be a heart attack, because I was only, 56, 58.
Wow.
So I was quite young. And the at the end of the day, I just went to bed thinking I need to sleep this off.
It turned out to be something else.
Woke up again, phoned up, thought I'll just ring 111, which is the number you ring for if you want a second opinion kind of thing, non-emergency. And they said, I'm just going to ask you some questions and we'll see. So he asked me 2 questions out of this whole battery. He asked 2 questions. He said, right, you need to get to the nearest hospital as quickly as you can. Being naive, I said, well, we've got a walk-in centre in Loughborough. And he said, no, you need to go to one of the major hospitals, Leicester or Nottingham, and report to A&E now. So I went in, and it was then they did the tests and discovered I'd had a heart attack. But over the next 3 or 4 months, I mean, I've actually got, 13th of August was my heart attack. 15th of November was my heart surgery. So I've actually got them to sort of tattooed on here along with my heart trace.
Clearly, those episodes, it made like an indelible dent on your life's journey, pretty much.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think after the heart attack, there was still an element of, well, I'm still going, so I'll keep going. There wasn't that real understanding of how major the situation was, because most people think of a heart attack as, someone talks and they go and die. Of course. And then you have to do CPR.
Yeah,
with me, it wasn't like that. I just thought it was indigestion. Also, when they did my heart trace was perfectly normal. There was no indication of a heart attack. And the type of heart attack I'd had is a kind of heart attack that doesn't affect the actual heart trace.
So what was it?
So it was called an end-STEMI heart attack. So if you're looking at a heart trace, okay, you've got an ST. Various parts of the wave have different letters, and depending on whether the line is the line at the end is raised or not. If it's raised, it's a STEMI heart attack. If it's not raised, then it's a normal heart rate.
So obviously, you mentioned faith playing a major role in your recovery. What does faith mean to you?
Well, I'm a Christian. I believe that God has a purpose.
Absolutely.
In my life, and a purpose for my life. I think part of that is me doing things and discovering whether that's really what God needs. Because very few people have that ability to discern on a daily basis everything you do, what God's saying.
Yeah.
So, I think part of my journey is that I've learnt that sometimes I have to step out and almost test the water. But when it came to the heart attack, post-surgery, I had a lot, that's exaggeration. I had some serious complications. Basically, they had to take me down to surgery and reopen me and do a second round because I was bleeding internally. So I had two heart surgeries within the same day. And then as a result of that second surgery, my guts shut down and decided they weren't going to work. So then when that happens, it affects absolutely everything. So I was, at one point, it was a bit kind of touch and go as to which way I would go. And in that situation, that's when your faith, I guess, becomes tested or becomes the bedrock on which you set, because suddenly there's nothing you can do.
Indeed.
You are totally dependent on the people around you.
Yeah.
And so you have to submit to other people. And I think sometimes just being willing to let other people help in the way that they know best, but is, without us interfering in that help, is a really good lesson in humility.
Very much so. Very much so. Speaking of humility, we're just going to circle back to the elephant in the room, NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. Is something, is a subject that's well researched by yourself, and you seem to be, not even seem, you are an expert. You're a neuroscientist, you're a psychologist, and you're also, managing the different platforms, offering support to people who have suffered or been victims to this very ugly condition, as I'll describe it. So, and even the subject narcissism is like everybody and your mom these days have diagnosed somebody that they know who's narcissistic, know, and it's like there's I'll say there's much, misunderstanding or description, if I'll use that word, of that term. So what's the difference or the key indicators between the narcissistic trait and the narcissistic personality disorder?
Okay.
What's the key difference substantively?
Narcissistic personality disorder is a clinical diagnosis.
Of course.
And there are, depending on the usual diagnosis that's used is the American DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness. And in that, there are 9 different definitions or 9 different components that if you have 5 or more, then you would be described as or diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. So narcissistic personality disorder is a formal clinical diagnosis where you need at least 5 out of 9 of these traits. And if you just give me half a second, I've actually highlighted this because I'll read these to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So, positive diagnosis requires demonstration of at least 5 of the following traits in a way that causes significant interference with love or work over an extended period of time. Grandiosity and self-importance, persistent fantasies of success, power, attractiveness, intellectual superiority, or ideal love, sense of being superior or special,
3,
wish to be admired,
4,
a strong sense of entitlement,
5,
to manipulate or exploit others,
6,
lack empathy,
7,
believe that others are envious of him or her, but actually they are envious of other people,
8,
and arrogant and contemptuous towards others.
Wow. So good. So now we've established these are like the key indicators or key like determiners. So if you score, if a person scores 5 out of this 7, not score necessarily, if you tick up 5 out of the 7, you probably are.
That would constitute a formal diagnosis. The fly in the ointment with this is that just by the very nature of what these people are like, one of the side effects is this whole the apparent high opinion of themselves. The reality is very different. They are completely insecure, very, very insecure people. And so they put on this mask or this front of trying to show that they're not. And if you want a case of that at the moment, just look no further than the US.
Because again, like I said earlier, right, most people seem to be, just handing out this diagnosis like it's like, Christmas presents these days. And most people know someone whom they, feel like, oh, I think that person is a narcissist, or my ex is a narcissist, stuff like that. So now you've described a more informed, educated way to determine, who is who isn't, which I feel like it's going to be very useful for most people who maybe at this point in the conversation they're starting to like piece and connect dots and make sense of this. And you also stated that the narcissistic behavior cost the US $2 million a minute.
Right, yeah, $1.92 million a minute.
And the UK about £44,000 per minute. How have we come about these figures, and is it that bad?
Yeah, I mean, if I just go back a little bit it's important to realise that we're not, when we talk about narcissists generally, and when most people talk about narcissists, you're not talking necessarily about somebody with narcissistic personality disorder. Each of those traits in itself is destructive. And it's a little bit like, I guess, if you were describing a car. If I came to you with a wheel and said, this is a car, you'd laugh at me. But actually, without the wheels, the car isn't complete.
Of course.
And so narcissism is made up of these different traits that are abnormal, dysfunctional, and destructive. And actually, you don't need to have you don't need a formal diagnosis. Most narcissists will try and claim that they're perfect anyway. So why would they bother going for it? Well, I don't need to go for a diagnosis.
I think that's the most concerning aspect of this conversation, because it takes like a great deal of self-awareness and humility and empathy to actually put the mirror against your own face and self-analyze. Like, am I a problem? Am I the problem? And when you have such low level of empathy or low level of self-awareness, like you rightly said, it's almost impossible to ever have such people, submit themselves to such, let's say scrutiny or, examination, and when you can't have that awareness, you can't have intervention. There can't be a solution. So that's sort of like a catch-22 situation there.
Yeah, and the classic thing is, one of the classic signs of narcissists, or one of the reasons they are so toxic, is that they have no ability to self-reflect.
Of course.
And they lack empathy. So you or I may say something totally inappropriate to someone and upset them, and they say, hang on a bit, that's a bit rude, and you're like, whoa, sorry. And then you think about what you've said and you apologise, and also use that experience to modify
your actions going forward,
how you behave going forward. Narcissists don't do that and can't do that and aren't interested in doing that. So they'll be rude, they'll be destructive, and the nearest you'll get to empathy from a narcissist is them basically blaming you that it's your fault for being in the way you are.
We can unpack that for all day. And I've got people who have shared stories, and I can share stories for days, but obviously we can't explore all of that right now. And you said something about they can't and won't. What's the place of willingness and feeling helpless in their situation? Is it within their control, or is it like some other factor out of their control in terms of like, submitting themselves to this process of reflection?
A lot of people in the area and certainly the researchers and the key voices in the area will tell you that narcissists have a choice and they make that choice, because if you think about how they behave, one of the destructive sides of narcissism is that for the person or the individual who's with them, life can be a little bundle of hell. For the people outside, the narcissist is charismatic, charming, the rest. And there's this massive difference between the two. So the narcissist can, if they want, understand how to react to get the favour of others. And so when they're outside of that situation, because they have such a low opinion of themselves and they rely on the opinion of others to feel good about themselves, they're jolly sure they know what they're doing and they know how to react to get that positive response. When they go back to their spouse or the person that they're picking on, they choose to be destructive, controlling, You know,
I mean, you've made a very vital point now, right? Regarding choice. And I want to explore that, expound on that for a second.
okay.
So, and you've also mentioned, just described a little bit about your background and your upbringing and your parents and their, posturing and, personality and whatnot. What's the impact of, or what's the place the parents play? What's the role they play in birthing or nurturing children to grow up eventually becoming two things, right? Someone diagnosed as having NPD and a person who finds someone who's an NPD or a narcissist attractive. Like, what makes a person submit themselves to that kind of treatment? So, two-pronged question, right?
Yeah.
Who makes and what makes narcissists? And what happens to people who present themselves, not necessarily find themselves in such a situation of helplessness? Why have they found themselves in such a dynamic?
Okay. There are encyclopedias written on the subject.
I know. We just have to go there.
I'm going.
I know that's someone's question somewhere, and I just, want to hear your thoughts.
It is a very important question. They think that there's a term, nurture and nature. So some of these people, basically, there's this nurturing, there's this example that's set, which as children, we look totally to our primary caregivers as our example. We learn our patterns, we learn how to respond, we learn everything. We learn about the world through the people we're most closely in contact with.
Yeah.
And so if you're a child growing up in a narcissistic family, a lot of the message you're going to receive is you need to perform before you can be acceptable. Now, for some of those, they will grow up to emulate their parents, and they'll grow up and become narcissistic because at some point they decide that actually protecting themselves by ignoring it and suppressing it is safer or easier than exposing themselves to finding out what's really going on inside.
Wow.
So you get some who become narcissists through choice. You also get those who grow up in exactly that same situation who become what I would call, normal's a horrible word because it's such a spectrum, but basically become normal? Good human beings. So they have empathy, they have the ability
almost to a fault, yeah?
Sorry?
Almost to a fault sometimes.
Yes.
Or so you're describing the average person right now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, both the normal person in the street who sees something and has a heart to respond if they need to. So they've got compassion, they've got some empathy, they've got some recognition. And so you've got some growing up to be narcissists, some growing up to be what we would class as normal.
Yeah.
But then you also get those children who come out of that situation. They come out of other situations as well, but can come out of this sort of situation with narcissistic parents where they spend their whole time appeasing the other party. And so they're overly empathetic, sometimes call these people empaths.
Yeah.
And the empath is almost as toxic to themselves as narcissists are to other people because they seek
validation.
They seek a need to be of use and to be of help. And so from the nature you can grow up from the same family and you could develop into a narcissist, a normal person, or you could become an empath. The interesting thing is that when you look at a lot of the issues with people who do grow up to be narcissists, what was surprising is that the people who are set no boundaries as children, the children who are spoilt, who get their own way, who are not challenged, who can't handle
criticism,
no as an answer, so they can't handle the criticism, those also will, if you're not very careful and they get balance from elsewhere, they are very much prone to growing up to be narcissistic.
Scary.
So childhood has a lot to play with it. There's evidence of some genetic involvement, not so much actually coded into the genes, but there's evidence that if you present two people with the same genetic structure to a different environment, they will, or two animals in this case, with to a different environment, they can grow up with very different personalities. They can grow up with very different resiliences and fears, etc. So it's a mixture of the two.
That's a lot. So you speak a lot about the mask, right?
Yeah.
That the narcissist wears. What are some early warnings, right, that a person should watch out for, before they obviously go into deeper relationships? And it's like in the like context of romance. So I meet a person, we obviously we're getting along, we're getting to know each other. What are like the telltale signs? Because now, like I said at the start of the conversation, anybody now is diagnosing anyone as oh, he's a narcissist, he's a narcissist. What are like the key things to watch out for?
Okay. The thing to remember is that because narcissists have these two sides, they appeal to our better nature. So initially, in any relationship, it's actually very difficult to determine who's a narcissist and who's not. And if you Dr. Ramani, or Dr. Ramani,
she's the GOAT.
Yeah, she is the GOAT in this area.
Yeah.
But if you talk to her about, well, do you get it right every time? And she'll say, no, certainly not. I continually struggle.
Even herself also misses it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's how convincing these people are, because what they do is they assess very quickly through their questions what it is that you want. They might be very subtle, but then what they do is they present themselves as the answer to your questions.
Wow.
So perfect match.
Wow.
We are made for each other.
Wow.
The telltale sign with a narcissist, as opposed to a healthy person, is that the narcissist moves at high speed. So they will push and push and push. They will press you to make a decision, which for normal people, there's no hurry. They get you to commit yourself to a situation where then you become.
Why is that though?
Victim. That's because they must be in control. Narcissists fear losing control more than anything else.
Wow.
So your and my idea of relationship is we go into this relationship because there's two of us, we have mutual contributions, mutual needs, and we'll meet that through the two of us.
Yeah.
Narcissist goes into a relationship which is, you don't matter, whatever you do must serve me and me alone. And that's their view of the whole world.
Wow.
The whole world is there simply to serve them. And so when you go into that relationship, whether it's just like, blindness or tunnel vision or whatever, they drive towards getting you to commit, because one of the tactics they will use is they will gradually break down resistance by, there's lots of terminology, gaslighting and stuff, but basically they will gradually distort your perception of reality, which makes you far more vulnerable and far more susceptible to control.
Wow.
So they might lie. You might say, well, that's a nice blue wall, Stuart. And if I was a narcissist, I said, no, it's green. And you say, no, it's blue. No, I'm sorry, you're wrong. There's something wrong with your eyes. That wall's green. And they will argue black is white to your face until you doubt yourself. Now, that comes later on. But if you're thinking about the development of a relationship, all the time they're feeding these low-level, subtle messages in to change your way of thinking, which basically massages you almost to being vulnerable to their suggestion and their abuse. And they eventually become so disorientated that the person relies on the narcissist, the victim relies on the narcissist for their perception of truth, which is, narcissists don't know truth if you smack them between the eyes with it. They will lie compulsively for no reason at all.
So that's a lot to unpack again, but we'll just move ahead, right? So, because like you said again, it's difficult to tell from a mile away, right? And you said even like one of the most like knowledgeable, well-researched persons in the field of NPD. That's Dr. Ramani. You said even herself admits that there are times where she misses it, right?
Yeah.
So when you see like a romantic interaction, a man, woman, however you want it, right? What would you look out for to identify that this seems a bit off?
The narcissist will talk initially. You'll find the narcissist asks the other person a lot of questions.
Initially.
Yeah, desperate. They're all over. I mean, it's like being flooded by love.
Love bombing, right?
But yeah, love bombing. That's the word. But it's flooded by love in the form of questions as well. So what the narcissist does is they do this like, in the name of love, they will interrogate you without you realizing it to find out what are your buttons, what makes you react badly, what makes you happy, what do you strive to be, what are you looking for in a partner, what are you looking for in life. They store that and then they kind of lay that, they act that back to you. So if you're in a relationship and they're asking you a lot of questions, almost like machine gun fire, intense questioning of you, but not telling you anything about themselves. In other words, you ask them about themselves.
They're not saying much.
They'll be very evasive. If you want to sniff out a narcissist pretty quickly, the sorts of questions you can ask are...
Take your notes.
Okay.
What is question?
Tell me something you've done that's average. Tell me 3 mistakes you've made that you corrected and how that changed your behavior. That kind of thing where you're touching on the very fabric that narcissists fear most, which is failure,
reflection,
imperfection, that kind of thing. You'll find they either become very evasive or they can't answer that, or they'll become very aggressive and they'll just try and shut you down. So equally, asking them questions about things that are very uncomfortable to them, or even saying no, if you get a really strong reaction from them, that's a dysfunction. That's likely to be a dysfunctional relationship, because part of proper development is asking questions. It's about finding out about each other. It's about saying yes and no. It's about setting those boundaries, all those limits of what we're prepared to abide by. Narcissists don't have boundaries. They'll trample yours, and they'll be in your lap before you welcome them. So it's about being aware of how they're reacting, and if you start seeing strong reactions from people who are basically just not getting their own way, that's a serious red flag. And they may just be over flooding you. You talked about love bombing, which is typically where the narcissist will buy you expensive presents, take you on expensive holidays, do everything for you, almost not allow you to do things for yourself. Not because they think it's good for you, but because it puts you in debt to them. So a lot of the love bombing is about building up in the victim this sense of commitment or a sense of indebtedness, And so the narcissist, it's all about imbalance of power. The narcissist has the power, the victim has none. So anything where you notice that one person is taking over, that's another red flag.
Wow. So for many survivors, right? I mean, we've got people out there who are currently in a situation like that, currently, enmeshed into this kind of picture you've described. What would you say to someone who feels guilty for staying too long? Like, I've been here 20 years, 10 years. I've known them all my life. I owe them everything. What would you say to such a person in terms of how to fight back and get back their power and pretty much just take the pieces and just, move?
Yeah. The first thing would be, it's not your fault.
Say that again.
It's not your fault. Okay? Because narcissistic relationships are all about the narcissist passing or projecting their guilt onto the victim. So the victim feels totally inadequate and impotent really to do anything about it. They also feel incredibly guilty.
Yeah.
Especially if they find out that if they start to recognise that things are going wrong and that their partner's there, very often the question they'll ask is, why haven't I seen this? The answer is you've not seen this because the narcissist has manipulated you into a position that you won't see it. And so the guilt, the sense of stupidity, the sense of going mad, these are all perfectly normal for victims of narcissistic abuse. It's how the narcissist retains their power over people. Narcissists are all about power over people rather than power with people.
What's healing like? So now you've given like a key step or tactics to like, get back your power and, build yourself back up. What's the healing journey like? Because oftentimes we hear stories where a person, gets some measure of power, wants to move along, narcissist comes back and just, takes them back to the beginning of the cycle, love bombing all over again, and some, psychologists would say the best is like stonewalling, just cut them off. There's this like, new trend or about cut them off. Is that like a sustainable, effective way to deal with it going forward?
It depends on the individual. Some people can do that. In the if you like, the best case scenario, no contact or cut him off completely is the best, because it doesn't matter how much you let them in. If you let them in the slightest bit, they will be back in, and they will be doing this. They will double down on the manipulation, and your life will become double hell rather than just hell. Wow. So, the ultimate best step is say no contact at all. So there's zero contact. If you do need to make any contact, it's through a third party. You avoid that. Some people can't or won't leave a narcissistic relationship. So they may have children, may be invested in the family and caring for elderly relatives, whatever it is, and don't feel able to leave the relationship. That is a compromise from the point of view of the person's quality of life. But it's then about readjusting your expectations from the relationship. So a normal person would expect love, mutual support, encouragement, none of which will come from the narcissist. If you're going to stay with them, the fact you're going to get nothing back is your new starting point. And you think, well, if I'm not going to get relationship or input from you as my partner, where can I get it from? And so it's then about setting up, either re-establishing old friendships that you're likely to have lost, because narcissists will try and isolate you from family and friends anyway, so that let's spend more just time, us two together. And then you've got no support, you've got no reference point. It's a great way to manipulate you. But start looking for relationships outside of the relationship, friendships, if you like, of people you can trust, which is very important, and people who are not afraid to give you their honest opinion. Because what that does is it allows you to reset the baseline for what is going to be normal. It won't be normal. If normal is here, okay, your normal for narcissism may be much, much lower, because you're not going to get anything back. And so it's about finding where else you can get that from, whilst avoiding behavior and words that will inflame the narcissist. So accusation, they thrive on chaos, they thrive on conflict, they love, any attention is better than none. So it doesn't matter whether you give them a compliment or abuse them, insult them. Very often to the narcissist, the insult is actually far more gratifying than this whole thing, what we call supply. So if you try and disengage from conversations that make it personal to becoming just a general conversation, and if you were to say to me, if you were very rude to me as a narcissist, rather than saying, well, you may think that, but my response is much more healthy. It would be something like, I don't agree with that. Because what you do is you then put the power back on yourself to make that decision, and the narcissist is totally cut off. So it's about, that's a sort of practical example of starting to set boundaries that are there to protect you from further damage.
Yeah. So can we say that individuals who've been diagnosed either formally, informally with this MPD, are they damaged goods? Is there redemption? Can they be salvaged? What can they do? If at all they want to.
Is it
treatable?
No, basically. The overwhelming evidence is that there are some narcissists who have an element of awareness that what they're doing is not right, and they will enter into treatment, they'll enter into therapy. But just because of the nature of who they are, they don't have that sustainability to keep going and keep going. And when the going gets tough, they drop out because it's a lot easier to revert back to their routine, default program of be a pain in the backside kind of thing. So people largely will say narcissism is people with MPD and strong narcissistic traits will not change. But it's important to be able to discern between the narcissists and those who may be toxic or those who may be ignorant. So if you're in a toxic environment, it's very easy to just kind of absorb what's going on around and become part of it. But if someone points out to you like, oh, you're becoming like the rest of them, you are then still in a position to go, thanks for pointing that out. I hadn't noticed it. And then you take action.
Yeah.
Narcissists will never do that.
Wow. Speaking of toxic, right? And you've also given us just a snapshot of your experience in a toxic work environment. For a person who feels like or whose lived experience is a toxic work environment, what are the subtle signs to see maybe before you get the job or start to work with a certain person? Now, this leader, this boss, this manager might be on the spectrum. What are signs for a person to validate or confirm or affirm that this environment feels a bit off, and what can such a person do at that point in time?
The first thing is awareness, which is really important, because if you're not aware of the problem, you will never see yourself being manipulated. If you're going into an interview, for example, to go for a new job, go with some prepared questions that you can ask, which sit along the lines of what we've talked about before.
Yeah.
I'm in the interview chair asking the interviewer, what have you done, for example, in work? What have you done in work where you've made a mistake or you've done something wrong? What have you done to correct it, and how's it worked out?
Yeah.
And those sorts of questions immediately challenge the narcissist's frailty. They may overreact with, if they come out with abuse or that's none of your business or I don't make mistakes, okay, red flag, go to the next job, don't go anywhere near that place. It's about, in interviews, it's about being aware of the questions that you can ask. And to be honest, now with the internet, if you even to put in a search engine something like questions to ask at interview, to show narcissist boss or something like that, it will come up. There's lots of papers and lots of work out there that give you the kinds of questions that you can ask that will then expose going into it.
So about a person who's already in the role?
In the role, yeah.
What can I do? My boss is a nightmare. It's toxic, exhibiting certain traits that I can say is, borderline narcissistic. What can I do? How can I protect myself, my boundaries, my mental health?
Part of it is it's a longer term project, but actually finding out whether whether you should stay or not. And I say that because sometimes what you have in a multi-layer organization is you may have a really empathetic CEO of the company, but they've just become so separated from the working front, as it were, by the layers of management that they're unaware of what's really going on. And so if you're able to find out what the head of the company's like, and there's a sense that there's empathy there, then you've got some grounds for standing up to the boss. Make sure you write absolutely every interaction down, every, whenever they're on your back, write it down. Don't let them know you're writing it down, but make sure you write it down if you're in a discussion and you come up with a plan for going forward. Send them an email with the meeting, and these were the agreed points, and this is who's going to do it.
Document.
So document. So you've got that trace that if you need to take it up, you've got the evidence.
Brilliant.
The problem comes when, and it's really interesting you should ask me this question, because I was talking to someone only this week where they worked in a well-known company. They had a toxic boss. They approached the boss above the toxic boss, who then passed that approach back down to the toxic boss.
Wow.
So she approached the CEO of the company, who then passed her approach to him back down to the toxic boss. So she went outside of the company to the owner of, this was a motor company, and it was the usual thing, you've got one or two, like the VW Porsche family or whatever, and other people who own the majority of motor corporations and organizations. She actually went out to the owner of the company to pursue that, and it was only when he didn't so much condone what she was doing, but he just said, right, you need to settle this legally, that it was sorted. So if the trouble's at the top, your best thing is protect yourself through not interacting as much as possible. Be safe. Don't provoke them, but look for a job elsewhere. Apart from that, life's great.
Wow. So obviously we're in a digital age, and social media is a key part of our existence now as humans. What role do you think social media is playing in producing more narcissists, or giving room for this to build up?
Yeah, I think when you talk about narcissists, the traits of narcissists, it's about personal fulfillment. It's about this thing of being able to show how good you are, how successful you are. And social media platforms give narcissists a voice. So social media is actually a neutral entity. It can be used for good as much as it can be used for bad. The problem is that because of the invasive nature of narcissism, and also I think the cultural thing, this whole thing of celebrity and celebrating those who are strong-minded and speak their mind, they're seen as the decision makers and the bold people. But the reality is they're usually the cowards, but they're living off the decisions of the people underneath them whose credit they're stealing. So it's about, social media can fulfill virtually every need of someone with narcissistic personality disorder. And so it becomes a breeding ground, because like attracts like. And very often you will then get narcissists who attract other narcissists, but also narcissists who attract empaths. And so it can be a real breeding ground for abuse, or for, expanding their kingdom. And, we hear of keyboard warriors, and we see these influencers, many of whom are balanced, normal people. But also when you watch people on those platforms, how often are they talking about I, me, mine, my network, my importance, my value, that kind of stuff.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Yeah, so I'm just going to wrap up with this quick thought regarding family dynamics.
Okay.
There are a lot of people who feel like, I feel my dad is one, I feel my mom is one, but we don't have that kind of conversation, or because of like the power distance or power dynamics, I can't call them out. What would you say to a person who feels like, I think I was raised in a very toxic way, or my parents, or my father, mother, sibling, whatever the case, is somewhat toxic, what can I do to, call them out if I need to, or how can I protect myself?
Firstly, never call them out, because if you call them out, they will double down because they're in denial. Although they know deep down what they're like, you will release. It's basically, when you're dealing with a narcissist, you're dealing with a 7-year-old child in an adult body.
Crazy.
So when you talk to them, you're getting a child's tantrum in an adult body. Narcissists, particularly covert narcissists, who are the ones who are less obvious, if you look at the traits for mass murderers in the States, people who do the mass shootings, a lot of those are classic covert narcissists.
Wow.
Now, not everybody's going to become at that extreme, but narcissism and in abusive relationships, physical abuse is really rife. So don't call them out. If you suspect something, again, try and look outside, look online, look up narcissists, look up traits, look up narcissistic parents. There's lots of stuff out there that will actually help you to understand how these people act, how you feel, which will then allow you to have a better idea, but also reach out outside. And a really good place to start,
of course,
at least for offloading, is things like the family doctor. GPs are a great sounding board. If you're uncertain, they can usually put you in the direction of counselling. But if you decide to go to a counsellor, it's really important that you choose what we call here we go, brain. It's trauma-aware counsellor. Okay,
fantastic.
So if you get the wrong counsellor, there's a good chance that they will actually compound the issue inadvertently because they don't know how to deal with it. So if you are looking for outside help, look for someone who's trauma-aware or trauma-informed, and they will be able to deal with you in a way that allows you to express yourself without damaging you, and which will also clarify your perspective and, bring it into focus and let you know reality from probably what you've been taught.
Brilliant. So if there's a person out there who feels like, I'm having it worse, I'm in a relationship or in a work environment and it's hell for me. I can't deal. I want to destroy it all away. I want to take my life. I feel so this or that. And they want to reach out. They want to, get on your network, your platform. How can they contact you? How can they reach out? What kind of support will you, do you render? Where do they start?
Okay, I'm not a therapist, so I don't do one-to-one counselling. What I do have on the website, which, as you mentioned before, narcissistic-abuse.net, what I have got on there is I have a blog that I quite regularly update. I also have a contacts page, which is, it's one of those things that's evolving. It's getting bigger as it goes, but it's people on there who are those that have proven expertise in dealing with victims of narcissism. So my platform is fairly small. My platform is much more of a post, kind of posting them elsewhere.
All right.
If you want real good value stuff that will help to explain in no nonsense terms what's going on, I always go, Dr. Ramani is, for me, I know she upsets some people, but she upsets people because she's honest.
Yeah, brutally honest.
And she's not afraid to say, she's not afraid to say something just to appease people. And she's also had a massive experience with real life patients and with, the research that she does as well. So I'm fine, but to be honest, I have written a book, as you may know.
So how can they get the book? What platforms can they get the book?
The book is it's available on Amazon.
Okay.
It's called Escaping the Void: How to Support Victims Out of Emotionally Abusive Relationships. Instantly recognisable by the very subtle cover. It is available on Amazon. In the UK, it's also available from high street booksellers as well. So if you go, they might not have it on the shelf, but if you want to ask for it, that's sometimes when you're dealing with narcissism, particularly in a close relationship, secrecy on your part is important. So
It's been a mind-blowing conversation. I'm sure the audience as well would have learned a lot in terms of how to, protect themselves, how to identify, a narcissist from a mile away in a romantic relationship, work environment. And I believe this is definitely an invaluable conversation. And I'm really, really grateful for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all the nuggets and all the brilliant, tactics that you've taught us. And obviously, we're going to be having more conversations like this. And if you found this valuable, please like this, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you know anyone who, might be needing this kind of support and this information you've learned might be useful for them, please endeavor to share it, pass it on, and let's, support ourselves through this very difficult situation that, some people might be, enmeshed in. And thanks again for your time. And I hope you enjoyed this. And obviously, there's going to be more such. Thank you, Dr. Stuart. Thank you for your time.
No problem.
And,
Thank you very much for having me.
We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.